right, everyone. This is going to be a special interview, our first guest of 2026. And I say we're starting off on a bang. She is also going to show up on the Jimmy Dore show. That's going to be hosted by Keaton a little bit later today. So, again, shout out to everyone who's an advocate for free speech. Her name is Jenin Younes, and she has been, at least I want to pull this tweet up right here, and something I could relate to. It's very mood kindred right here. So we're just going to read it here. We're going to read it here. I'm coming to terms with the fact that when Democrats are in power, I'll be critiquing them and getting called, I'm going to say the C word because of YouTube guidelines, by the left. And when the Republicans are in power, I'll be critiquing them and getting called C word by the right. Sorry, guys, I'm not partisan, and you can name call all you want. I'll never be one. So there you go. And I say, welcome home, Google Gobble. You're one of us. I'm not going to do her any justice. First of all, I would like my guests to introduce yourself. Please don't hold anything back. For our viewers and subscribers, give us a brief background on who you are. Tell us a little bit about yourself, because we got a lot to unpack here.
Sure. My name is Jenin Younes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. I'm sorry I said your last name wrong.
But don't worry. Most people get my first name wrong too. So I'm a civil liberties attorney with a focus on free speech. I used to be a public defender in New York City. It's hard to describe in a nutshell. I would say I was sort of on the left for most of my adult life till COVID. And then I was very perturbed by COVID restrictions. I thought they were wrong. I would say I kind of became more libertarian, saw the flaws in a lot of leftist thinking, or moved over to the right even. Sometimes I got mad enough to vote Republican. But then after October 7th, I sort of ended up going that. I don't want to say going back, but having a lot of problems with the right and their support for Israel and support for censorship policies around that. So here I am.
well, welcome. I think you found yourself a wonderful community to be part of, because most of my audience is independent. Now, yes, I have people across the political spectrum who watch my show, and I'm all for sharing ideas and information. And, all in all, living in these dangerous times that we are in, especially last year when YouTube deleted 12 million plus channels. But we are in a point in time where free speech is on the chopping block. And I did find something very interesting that you wrote, and this is where title is, she took Biden to the Supreme Court over free speech and says Trump is worse. Now, we, Hard Lens Media, and a lot of my colleagues in independent media under the Biden administration dealt with the jackboot of censorship that was happening under that Democrat administration. And there was an infrastructure put in place. Mind you, again, we still have to point out that 2016, more people being censored and suppressed, and now it's evolved into this monster that I don't think we could take down. But you took Biden to the over free speech, so I want to at least address this. What were some of the things that you were addressing about Joe Biden and what his administration was doing to free speech? And now, and this is getting me a little scared here, because I have dealt with censorship and suppression not once but 9 times. Why is it worse under Trump? So let's start from the beginning with good old Joe Biden himself.
Yeah. So the case that I ended up in the Supreme Court on had to do with the Biden administration using its power to get social media companies to censor certain viewpoints on social media. So mainly about COVID, protesting government restrictions, vaccine mandates, but the vaccine itself, the COVID vaccine itself, as well as stuff having to do with the 2020 election, people who thought that Trump won it, various other topics as well, but those were the main two. Also the Hunter Biden laptop story. That was the third main topic.
Agreed.
And so the First Amendment prohibits the government from abridging the freedom of speech. The language of the First Amendment is abridging the freedom of speech. It also, the Supreme Court has been very clear that means the government can't use intermediaries, third-party intermediaries, to do what it can't do directly, which obviously makes sense in all, constitutional contexts. For instance, the government can't search your home without a warrant. If the government could just hire a private company or threaten a private company into searching your home without a warrant, there'd be no purpose to the Fourth Amendment. So the whole idea is the government can't sort of outsource what it can't do directly to private entities. So our argument was that by pressuring, threatening, and even sometimes acting in cooperation with the government to censor speech, with the social media companies to censor speech, the government was violating the First Amendment rights of our clients, who in that case included Jay Bhattacharya, who's now the NIH director, and Martin Kulldorff, who is in HHS. He actually was in CDC, and he just informed me a couple days ago he's in HHS now. So some high profile clients. The case, we won in the two lower courts, and then we got to the Supreme Court, and we didn't exactly lose. It's sort of For non-legal people, it can be a little technical, but the court basically said we couldn't show that we couldn't show causation. We couldn't show that our clients had been censored by the government, that the social media companies might have decided to do this on their own.
Okay.
It wasn't clear who was directly responsible.
All right, I just want to point out, and I do apologize.
Yeah.
Your mic
No,
was
no.
kind of going a little bit out, so maybe
Oh,
you want to
okay.
be a little closer. So again,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
all in all, I think before we talk about Trump and why he's a danger, because in my opinion, the administration earlier last year was saying that they took apart the Biden censorship machine, which
Yeah.
again, in my opinion, I'm probably wrong.
Mm.
I think it's still there humming along, but at least because, and I know it's difficult to explain the law because there's so many intricacies about it. The wheels of justice move slow. I've been learning that the hard way,
Yes.
especially when it comes down to federal court.
Very slow.
Extremely slow, and I hate
Yeah.
every minute of it. But the Supreme Court's basically saying, well, the government's not censoring you. But yet I've seen firsthand, at least my colleagues on the left and on the right, libertarians, being censored, being deplatformed, knowing how big tech invests into these politicians. And of course, you got corporate media. I mean, an active mind is looking at this and saying, well, of course they are, maybe not directly, but by proxy, there's an involvement here. So why is the Supreme Court even saying this when the evidence is clear? I mean, I've gone through it. Bigger people than me are going through it. And last year, so many channels who aren't even doing what I'm doing, some of them doing entertainment and other fun kind of content are I think there's a ringing in the background.
That's I can mute my mic.
Okay. So just before we get into this, it's like so many people have been hit with that censorship, and that is just beyond nuts. So I want to give the floor to you. Just explain a little bit more about this.
Yeah, sorry, my carbon monoxide detector is going off. I'm trying to get my husband to turn it off. I'm sorry about that. Okay, he got it. It happened in the middle of the night last night, so
no, it's all good. A little bit of a side note. Make sure your carbon monoxide and fire detector is working properly.
I think it's just a battery issue. But
okay.
So yeah, to be clear, the court didn't say that your clients weren't censored or they weren't censored by the government. They just said you didn't prove it because the companies had their own content moderation policies anyway. But of course, I think that's the wrong analysis because almost nobody's going to be able to prove that they specifically were censored because of the government. It should be enough that the government was behaving unlawfully by doing this and that your clients were censored or the people who brought the lawsuit were censored. And I agree with you. Trump claimed to put an end to this a year ago. I don't think that's true. I think in fact, I'm pretty sure they're working with social media companies just to censor speech that they don't like. So it's on different topics and different viewpoints, but I'm fairly certain they're doing more or less the same thing. So it hasn't ended at all. And I think the reason the Supreme Court reached this decision was because they just wanted to dodge the issue. So they basically said, we're not going to reach what's called the merits of your case, the real arguments. We're just finding your clients weren't even the right people to bring this suit, so we're not going to address whether the government was violating the law. So I think they just didn't want to deal with it. It was it is a complicated lawsuit. It wasn't like one conversation or one text message or anything that you can trace back. We were talking about thousands of emails and conversations. We got some limited early discovery and we had I think it was around 20,000 pages of documents or 20,000 documents. And we took 10 depositions. And this was just the tip of the iceberg. So I think the court frankly was just we don't really know how to handle this. Let's just say they don't have standing.
Oh, okay, great. So now I know why things are going the way they're going. So now let's get to everyone's favorite president, the most transparent president in human history, at least sarcastically, in my opinion. Donald Trump. Why is he in danger?
Yeah, to free speech. Well, so I did say he was worse, and I hesitated to say that for a long time because what Biden did was very dangerous too. And part of the danger lay in the fact that it was covert. Donald Trump is kind of pretty open about what he does, which has its pros and cons. I think there's something to be said for the fact he just makes clear what he's doing illegally. But on the other hand, his brazenness and I think willingness to flout the law is a problem in terms of constitutional norms and stuff. He's just I don't really care what the law is. But I would say, he's done a lot of problematic things when it comes to free speech. So I think first, the arrests of non-citizens, putting them in ICE detention for pro-Palestine speech, which is unprecedented, really, in this country's history, for people, criticizing a foreign country, criticizing Israel's war in Gaza, and being told, or being arrested under the guise of you're anti-Semitic, and so we're going to deport you, including a green card holder, Mahmoud Khalil, many visa holders. That's just really unprecedented in our country's history, with maybe some exceptions during the Red Scare era that the Supreme Court mostly didn't like very much. And then there have been other forms, strong arming universities into settlements on the grounds that they censor especially pro-Palestine speech. There were, the Jimmy Kimmel situation where the FCC basically told ABC to get Kimmel off the air, or they were going to have problems. It's all the same. It's all very similar stuff. But those cases have actually been winning more, I think, in part because the administration is so open about what they're doing.
And I think it's, again, a very frightful situation that we are in, because since last year, I've been noticing a lot of my colleagues in independent media being losing monetization, losing ground. I mean, I've been seeing it across all social media platforms, especially on X, and it leads me to wonder if this is where we're leading to since 2016. And I get what the 2016 election cycle meant to a lot of people. People were triggered by the words of Donald Trump. Then you had Hillary Clinton, you had Bernie Sanders, you had a lot. That was an intense election year where, I guess, for one moment, the rock was lifted and we saw all the neoliberal bugs swirling about, and people were addressing, like, hey, there's some things fundamentally wrong with this country, socially, nationally, internationally, how we've been enacting policies. And in turn, when Trump won in 2016, you had a lot of people do a knee-jerk reaction of, oh, why was he given a platform? Why was he this or this or that and the other? And then if you gave criticism to Democrats or criticism to Hillary Clinton, you were given the ultimate ban. And I've dealt with that, and especially even when Joe Biden was running. Oh, you want Trump to win? No, I don't want any of these people to win. But the infrastructure of corporate media censoring people, establishment censoring people, has been a devastating blow to a lot of us who, want to build online independent platforms to speak about issues that MSNBC or CNN or Fox News won't talk about or won't to go into detail about. So as someone who's been in the battleground dealing with criticism on the left and the right, overall, what is the picture looking like, at least for the next year, with the amount of censorship that we are seeing play out, especially when it comes down to talking about sensitive issues, especially most notably what's going on now in Minnesota with the shooting of that young woman?
Well, the future of free speech doesn't look very good. My job just keeps getting busier and busier, and I think part of the problem is that neither side is really committed to it. What each side claims to care about free speech, and then when they're in power, they just nobody ever says, I want to censor protected speech. They come up with, well, this is misinformation. This is killing people, as they said about like vaccine misinformation, or this is terrorism, as they said about Mahmoud Khalil. Or so they try to, tie it to certain exceptions, but it's not really, these are not recognized exceptions to protected speech. So there's a lack of commitment to it. And I think this is part of the sort of bitter political divide that we see in our country more broadly, which is that the left and right, or Democrats, Republicans, however you want to put it, hate each other so much that they care much more about getting back at each other and taking away each other's rights than they do about upholding the Constitution or respecting individual liberty.
Yeah. And I think that is interesting. You pointed out, like, when one side says they're for free speech, and then when they are in power, they quickly deny it to the other side. And it's interesting seeing it on the right, because I was against what happened to the people of January 6th. I was against what was happening for people who were speaking about against corruption, anything, no matter whether you're on the left or on the right. And I'm all for people's right to protest. Now, I, again, have said so on my show, like, I find a lot of these protests in front of Trump Tower here in Chicago to be repetitive. And that's just my opinion. I think it's just a waste of time. But they have the right to do so. What I don't like is then automatically the Uno reverse card that either side does to the other side, and that is, you can't speak. And I think the vast majority of people want to have a conversation, yet we keep on falling for the trap of fear the other, fear your neighbor, fear your coworker, fear everybody. And it's leading to people have this brain rot to where my side is always right, and if you speak out against a narrative, you are cast aside. And I've dealt with that with the censorship, and I think you have dealt with that, especially with people criticizing you. So I think it's only important now to really address challenging power. And as an attorney, you're fighting for free speech. Are there moments where you're looking at this and think, like, are people listening? Because quite recently, you had the vice president of the United States criticize your tweet, and I want to pull it up here. But first, I want you to answer this question. Like, overall, like, how do we keep the sword and shield in hand defending free speech? Because we have to address what's happening in Minneapolis, and we have to address what the vice president said to you as well.
Well, I think people need to, the most important thing is to realize that you are, free speech means hearing things that you don't like, that make you upset, and that you disagree with. And you have to be willing to defend people's right to say that too. Nobody has a problem defending speech that they agree with. Nobody. There is nobody on this earth who thinks their own side should be censored. So the real test of whether you're committed to free speech as well, whether you're willing to stand up for speech you disagree with. And it doesn't, I think it's not necessarily instinctive. We do have a sort of natural inclination to censor or to want to silence speech that offends us. But we have to fight against that. That's part of what it means to live in a civil society. That's, part of recognizing that it's very dangerous to give the government the power to decide who gets to be heard, who's silenced, what speech is punished, what's not.
Mm-hmm. I agree indeed. And now when it comes down to social media, let's face it, X, Twitter, however you want to call it, whatever name you want to give it, is a cesspool. I mean, there's no cleaning it up, and everyone's swimming in it, and you have to live with the stain of it. But you recently posted on X, and this has to deal with, again, the unfortunate loss of life in Minnesota. And I just want to read your tweet, because the vice president responded. I'm a former defense attorney and currently a civil liberties attorney with no political dog in this fight. I watched the video at least 10 times from different angles and at different speeds and waited to offer an opinion, which I still reserve the right to change if additional information changes the calculus. And it's very clear. That's correct. That's a correct way to look at things. It is very clear that the officers instigated the confrontation. The woman initially tried to wave them past her. ICE officers have no authority to search a U.S. citizen or arrest her unless there is a probable cause to believe she's harboring undocumented individuals, not a contention here. A woman surrounded by masked armed men who have no law enforcement authority over her has every right to try to escape. Video shows her steering the wheel is turned to the right, clearly an attempt to leave without hitting anyone and steer clear of the officer standing towards the front of her car. That officer had time to step to the side, which is where he was when he shot her. Even a real police officer would not have the right to shoot her for trying to flee. This is a well-established in the case law. Deadly force may not be used simply to prevent someone from getting away. Given that the ICE officers had no law enforcement authority to begin with, and the video footage shows she was trying to escape a perceived threat, not to kill anyone, the crime is all the more inexcusable. I'm praying for the victim's family, especially her children. I'm also praying for all the conservatives who are so unprincipled and lost. They've been excusing this terrible crime and gloating over her death that will leave 3 young children motherless because of the victim's politics. So you addressed, and I know there's more video footage coming out now, and I talked about this with Keaton, who is the co-host of Due Dissidence and will be hosting the Jimmy Dore show, and I believe you'll be on that show a little bit later today. Look, I've watched the video. It's absolutely disgusting and terrible. And, as someone who served in the Marine Corps, that is not how you do crowd control. That's not how you do site security, none of that nature. And that was a complete escalation of force. And again, there is supposedly the officer in question, or ICE agent who held that, who did shoot, had a cell phone in his hand. I'm very curious if he was recording at the time, because I'm very curious what's on that phone and what will happen afterwards. But please explain with this tweet, because it got a response with JD Vance.
So I will back up and say I was not expecting this tweet to go anywhere. I actually did not want to comment on the issue. I like to wait a few days generally with these things and see how the evidence plays out. But I felt, given my background, I should say something. So sort of around 10 at night, I was about to go to bed, and I was like, I'm just going to put something out. There are a couple parts that I would reframe if I knew how viral it would go. And when I woke up in the morning, I saw it had gone like mega viral. And then 5 minutes later, JD Vance had retweeted. So I like some of the statements I made about ICE having no law enforcement authority, those were sort of sloppy. I mean, they didn't have law enforcement authority over her in that situation. They don't have they can't do traffic control, so they didn't have authority to try to wave her over, to stop her. They certainly didn't have authority to sort of yell at, try to get her out of the car, that kind of thing, or to search the car. So she wasn't under an obligation to comply with them. I mean, I'm not saying she should have gotten out of the car or stopped the car or something. I'm not saying she made the smartest decision in the world, but absolutely unjustified to shoot her 3 times.
Headshots, by the way, again,
yeah,
which is absolutely devastating, and the range it happened. And I understand, like, when you're in law enforcement or in the military and you're doing site security, patrolling, anything of nature, you're on edge, you have to protect yourself. But at the same time too, seeing how they just stop their vehicle, they're federal agents, by the way, they tell a woman to get the F out of the car, already weapons in hand, going to her door. I mean, I can't speak for anyone, but there's a flight or fight kind of momentum that's happening.
Yeah.
I'm willing to bet she got scared. And when that happens, adrenaline is rushing into your brain, into your heart, and you're going to, every person, I don't care who you are, will respond differently in that situation. And she just wanted to escape and flee because she was probably scared. She didn't want to get arrested. So go ahead.
Exactly. No, I would absolutely be scared. And I think people also have to understand, like, a woman in that situation might feel different than a man. I mean, yes, they're officers, but these are, people know a lot of ICE officers don't behave that well. They surrounded her car. They were being very aggressive. Like, they were masked. I would be pretty scared. I probably wouldn't have driven away because I'm a little bit more of a chicken than that. I probably would have stopped. But I can't say for certain how I would have reacted. But I think, regardless of, even if it turns out there's something missing to the story, there was some reason that this was more justified than it looked like. What I think the most troublesome part is high-ranking federal officials like J.D. Vance, the president of the United States, Kristi Noem, going out and saying immediately that this was a domestic terrorist event, which is ridiculous. Domestic terrorism. I mean, if you want to water down the word terrorism, I don't know how to better do it. But that she was at fault, that the officer was innocent. That is not what respectable government officials do. If I were in their shoes, I would have said, this was horrible. We will immediately conduct a thorough investigation, or we'll outsource it to the Minneapolis police department, because I think it would be hard to trust the federal government in this situation. Or, we'll set up some independent commission to investigate this. We're going to bring the officer in for questioning instead of running cover for the officer. I mean, all that does is make people have zero trust in this government. And it's scary. It's scary to think that you could be shot in the face 3 times, a 30-something mother of 3, and have the president of the United States, vice president, Department of Homeland Security director say that you were a terrorist and you deserved it.
Right.
It's crazy.
and again, look, I said this on my show last year when ICE was coming here to Chicago, when I was a guest host on the Jimmy Dore show. Protesting ICE, do so at your own risk, because these guys have a terrible track record of keeping site security and keeping control. I don't know who they're hiring or who they're bringing on board, but obviously their training is either mediocre, subpar, something. Because, and I want to bring this up because you might have seen this video, and a lot of people know what I'm going to reference, but in Chicago, there was a gentleman. ICE was patrolling downtown Chicago area, especially on the Chicago River, and there was a gentleman on a bike, cell phone in hand, no weapon, but he was saying F ICE, F Donald Trump, and then the ICE agents chased after him. And while we were all laughing because the ICE agents could not catch him, I said on Jimmy's show, and I even said on my show, and even online to my own friends, like, that is the precursor of things to come. If they're chasing him down for something that should roll off their back like water off a duck's back, it's going to get to a point where they're going to hurt somebody. And a few weeks later, on the south side of Chicago, ICE was detaining an individual who they claimed was an illegal immigrant on a busy south side street. The whole neighborhood comes out. They're not doing site security. They're having a trouble arresting him. They're hurting the guy, and everyone's saying, let him go, let him go, let him go. And they did so. But again, Chicago got lucky that no one died, but yet here we are now, and I want to pull this up. This is a tweet that a Vice President J.D. Vance responds to you. This is preposterous. First of all, she's not waving the officers through. She has no right to do so, even if she were. She's waving another car through before officers approach her. And okay, let's say she's doing that. That's fine. She has a right to do that, okay? And her vehicle was not stuck in the snow, by the way. Second, the officers are not randomly searching her. They are approaching her vehicle because she is violating the law. Namely, she is obstructing a law enforcement operation. You're not allowed to walk up to them, drive up to people who are enforcing the law to make it harder for them to do their jobs. Third, this defense attorney is drawing a meaningless distinction between an ICE officer and a real police officer. Again, you're not allowed to interrupt law enforcement operation, which is exactly what this woman was doing. Fourth, the officer didn't discharge his weapon to prevent her from fleeing. When he discharged his weapon, she had pointed the vehicle at him and pressed the gas. He discharged his weapon in self-defense, and other angles of the video show the woman clearly hit the officer with her while the car was accelerating. Trump has said the guy was in hospital. I've seen the video. The dude is walking just fine. The gaslighting is off the charts, and I'm having none of it. This guy was doing his job. She tried to stop him from doing his job. When he approached her car, she tried to hit him. A tragedy, absolutely, but a tragedy that falls on this woman and all the radicals who teach people that immigration is one type of law that riders are allowed to interfere with. So there's a lot to unpack here with this. I know, obviously, when you tweet this out, I don't think you expected it to go viral as it did. But if JD Vance was right here, please respond to this tweet in detail. Overall, what he is getting wrong, and clearly, you know, it's very rare to hear the vice president of the United States respond to you directly. So let's go ahead and
that's true. So first, there's no evidence that she was obstructing a law enforcement investigation. I know that's the contention they're making, just no evidence at all. In fact, so I don't think that dust is settled. It's not clear. So I could be wrong, but the latest that I heard was there's video evidence of her dropping her child off at school across the street and then driving her car, and she stopped for some reason. And she was kind of partially in the road. I mean, it's the kind of thing people might do if they got a phone call or a text message. It was, she wasn't parked in like the best way, whatever, but it wasn't, people were going through. It wasn't a big deal. So no evidence she was obstructing a law enforcement investigation. Even if she was, the really crucial question in the end is whether he was justified in shooting her. And that's clearly no, because she was driving away. Even if he was, as some people have contended, he was in front of the car and his life was in danger when she initially, I mean, it's pretty clear she was trying to drive away, but even if he was in danger when she initially sort of swerved that way, no justification for firing those second and third shots, zero. And that matters, those might have been the ones that killed her. We don't have an autopsy report yet. That also, I think, goes to show that his mindset was not one of, preventing his own death, but of trying to, take revenge on her or kill her for whatever reason. So there's just no justification here. I mean, the law in states, different states have sort of various ways of stating what the justification defense is. That's, self-defense, but you have to believe that your life is in imminent danger or others. And, you have to have reason to believe that. So there's a subjective and objective element. A reasonable person has to have, who's in your shoes would have thought that, and you actually believed your life was in danger. That's not what's going on here. And it's also worth pointing out that the guy didn't, a doctor tried to get to her body. There's video footage of that. It wasn't clear if she was dead. He's screaming, "Let me see if I can help." They won't let him through. The officer sort of walked away. This is not the behavior of somebody, if I were an officer, and I did many self-defense cases when I was a defense attorney, someone who actually committed an act of self-defense turns themselves in, says, this is a horrible thing that happened. Here's my gun. I want to cooperate with an investigation. That's not the behavior of this officer. And of course, that alone doesn't prove guilt, but all of this together, to me, is a pretty clear case at this point that this was not self-defense.
And as it stands right now, and while it's not related, it definitely has its connections. It was found out yesterday that in Portland, a man and a woman were shot by ICE officers, apparently, and there's more intensification and protests happening. Because let's be clear here, we saw firsthand, ICE agents going to the vehicle, going to this person. Now, I will say this, in my opinion, I think if you're going to be protesting ICE or following their vehicles, you are taking your life in your own hands, because I think professionally, the way they do site security and how they interact with the public is completely disastrous. I have not seen even police officers not do things this crazy, but I mean, this goes from 0 to 100 real quick. What I find absolutely devastating is that you have the president, the vice president, Kristi Noem, all coming up with different stories. Again, lies that have been exposed. And now comes the legal process of overall, this is going to come into a courtroom in some form or another. And I think for my viewers, I mean, I know it's early to explain, and I get that the wheels adjust, the process moves vastly different. It's not like how TV shows or the movies show it. But they get to the good parts in the movies and TV shows. But what lies in store potentially for what's happening here? Because I want to pull up a tweet here as well, where you address friend Patrick Jamico, I believe.
Giacomo, yeah.
Giacomo, yes. Where you say that he's a phenomenal lawyer. I want to pull this tweet up here. Sorry about this.
He takes a lot of police cases to the Supreme Court where police are have escaped accountability.
Yes, and you talk about he's interested in representing Miss Good's family pro bono, and if anyone can put him in touch, please do so. So explain this process that could potentially happen, because we're in the early stages of everything that could happen.
Yeah, Patrick is probably talking about a civil case because he's not law enforcement. He's not a prosecutor. As far as whether this cop or this ICE agent will be prosecuted, it's hard to say because I think it's pretty clear the federal government isn't going to do anything. Very unlikely there. And so the state of Minneapolis can try to prosecute this, but there will be defenses. It's hard to prosecute federal officers in state court for crimes committed, or I should say offenses committed in the line of duty, which he's going to argue it is. And the law is very complicated around this. So if it's like clear that it wasn't something that was arguably justifiable within the course of his duties, then maybe he won't get qualified immunity, but he probably will. So the best course for her family is most likely a civil lawsuit, holding the government and the officer civilly liable for what's happened. I'm not entirely without hope. I think there's a chance that Minneapolis will be able to prosecute the officer, but very unlikely.
Okay, so and how exactly can the federal government put on roadblocks to this? Can you give a little bit more detail about? I mean, I know there's a lot to unpack here, and I want to be clear to my audience that what you see in the movies and TV shows, it seems like it's happening fast. This is like a year long process, 2-year-long process to do this. But what are the barriers that are right now that the family will have to deal with? Because let's face it, they lost a family member, and 3 kids lost their mom. And I can imagine the pain and emotional scarring that will last with them for decades.
Yeah, and from what I understand, at least one of the children, they might have had different fathers, I'm not sure, but at least one of the children's father died too, so is a total orphan now. Well, as the employer and the federal government, what should happen is that the federal government should be investigating this and potentially prosecuting it. But because of the way the administration has behaved, I think that's exceedingly unlikely. So if I were the president, I would say DOJ has got to conduct an investigation and potentially prosecute this guy under federal law for murder, because that's essentially what he did. But again, probably not going to happen. So the state can try to prosecute him, but the guy will have defenses. There's what's called qualified immunity, where federal officers can raise the defense that they can't be prosecuted in state court for acts committed in the line of their official duties as federal officers. So that's likely a defense he'll raise. It's a very high bar to overcome for the government, for the state, if they want to prosecute him. So that's why I'm saying it's going to be a challenge. Now, if the Trump administration had any honor, it wouldn't be hard, because they would bring this guy to justice, but they're not going to do that.
And I want to pull up this tweet here too, because you did respond to the vice president. Hey, imagine waking up and the vice president responds to you, and something that was not on my bingo card for 2026. So already,
I actually said that to somebody.
Really, you said this was not on my bingo card?
Yeah. I said being insulted by the vice president wasn't on my 2026 bingo card.
You know what? I think already. Congratulations, for 2026, you the horse. You are my favorite guest for this year, as it stands. Everyone's got a high bar to go ahead. I think so. Everyone, mandatory gators in the chat for our guest. But here's what you responded to the vice president. JD, you are the vice president of the United States. As a U.S. citizen and mother of 3, was killed by an ICE official who works with the executive branch. Put otherwise for you, if you were serious about this, you would withhold judgment and call for an independent investigation of the events, not run for cover for the agent. That you and other members of the administration decided immediately the victim deserved it and labeled labeled her as a domestic terrorist conveys to the public that this is purely political. And this is going to be used as a political piece, especially for the midterm election cycle, as the protests are intensifying. And we're seeing both sides, Democrat, Republican, each going to their talking points, all while ignoring the fact that a U.S. citizen was just shot and killed before us in real time. It's almost like a scene from Black Mirror or The Twilight Zone or Outer Limits. We've learned nothing from those series, because you always hear at the end, especially for the Outer Limits, that scary voice. This is what happens when you give up your power and trust in the social media. We learned this lesson, and apparently we haven't. So your response to this, obviously you respond to the vice president, but it's clearly they're labeling her as a domestic terrorist, which is an interesting choice of words, because she has a right to protest, just like anyone on the right has a right to protest or counter protest.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and again, I think that is my ultimate point, is that even if she did do this, and it was somehow justified, the president of the United States and his administration should be calling for an investigation, conducting that investigation. Of course, that can't work now, because nobody would trust any investigation that they conduct. But if we had a trustworthy, if the public had trust in government, that's how it would work. And that's the system we should have, where a federal law enforcement officer kills someone, and we can trust that the federal government, DOJ, will investigate that crime and bring the perpetrator to justice if that's warranted. We don't live in that system now, because everything is political. And it was very scary to me to see immediately within an hour or so of the news coming out about this shooting, everybody falling along their divide about, well, I'm a conservative, so this must have been a rambunctious lefty protester who deserved it. And then on the left, I like abolish ICE, blah, blah, blah. It's just kind of weird. And I'll actually admit my sympathies were not my bias is not was not on her side. My immediate reaction is, oh, this probably the protesters were getting crazy and did something, and now it's being like an ICE shot. So, but then I, took the time to look into it before offering an opinion, because I think that's the right thing to do. And so
No, I absolutely understand, because look, I have my biases and my perspectives. I'm a little jaded when it comes down to Democrats and Republicans, and why I'm not really excited for the midterm election cycle. Chicago city election, that's a whole other different thing. And I could talk about that for hours on end. But this whole midterm election cycle, it's not getting me excited, or I'm not really interested in it. But we all have our biases and perspectives. But without a shadow of a doubt, I don't care who you are. I mean, if you're a parent, or Izadette, you know people who are parents, or people who like to be politically active. The last thing you want to see anyone happen to a protest or protester, at left or right, is someone losing their life. And if this is going to become the thing, it's very clear to me, especially with the actions the day after, where a memorial was stepped on and kicked out and pushed aside. You have people going to their tribal mentality and now pushing towards violence being the option, which again, in a constitutional republic, democracy, however which way you want to call it, people have a right to use their First Amendment to protest, which is I'm all for it. I may not agree with it, but you have the right to protest wherever you want, however which way you want, as long as people are able to hear the message and do that. But I do want to pull up something here for my audience, and this is from one of my viewers, Kit and Guest. How can the state prosecute without doing an investigation? I think you might have explained a little bit more into, but can you elaborate into that?
Well, no, the state would have to do an investigation, of course. I mean, if it sounded like I meant otherwise, I didn't. No, of course the state will most likely conduct an investigation, and I suspect they'll probably end up bringing charges, although I can't say. I just think he's going to raise qualified immunity defenses and say he can't be prosecuted in state court as a federal officer discharging his duties. That's a high bar for the state prosecutor, to overcome. So.
Okay, so I hope that answers your question. Again, viewers, if you do have questions for our guests, I will try my best to see it. But I mean, one person says right here, Chuck Buck says the video evidence against ICE is overwhelming, and we all can have opinions. Again, videos, matter of the law, can be interpreted. But if this were to be used, and let's say things do process forward, I mean, the video evidence, obviously the prosecution and the defense are all going to have their perspective on it. Now, my opinion, you see the ICE agent fire 3 shots. It doesn't look like he's going to get hit, and more video evidence is coming out, and you're hearing different eyewitness testimony. It's very clear that ICE was not in control of the situation, and my opinion, the woman got scared. She sees 3 men. Clearly, again, don't want to trigger people, but there is a difference between men and women and how we all respond, and men and women each respond to situations differently. But with that video evidence, let's say we do get a court case, something does proceed, something happens. What will the video evidence of different angles, at least in your opinion, how will the court, or either that the process be done to use that to maybe hold this agent accountable or either ICE accountable?
Well, they'll definitely use it if there's a trial, which would most likely be in front of a jury. They'll use it. There were eyewitnesses too. From what I understand, they have said that it did not look like self-defense at all. That it was clear that the officer was out of line of the vehicle's path as it turned. So the eyewitness testimony will also be very important, because I think most people understand that like video is, it only captures a certain angle. And some of the first videos that came out were less clear, and then there have been more that have, I think, made it much more evident that the officer was at fault and not justified in the shooting. And the New York Times one that came out yesterday, I think, was pretty. It's pretty hard to argue with that the officer is clearly out of the course of her car. So yes, these will be used. If there's a trial, they'll be used along with eyewitness testimony, and the jury, if there's a jury, will reach a verdict.
Yes. And now, first of all, I want to give a shout out to this viewer here, longtime viewer, Gray Walker joined third party, who's a fellow Marine like myself. No bullet holes in the windshield. How is this self-defense? Again, the fact that 3 rounds went, at least if not 1 round, went to the woman's head. And clearly, if you saw the video before it got censored, you see blood on the steering wheel, blood on the airbag. And clearly people were trying to address this. Also the forensics is going to show where the rounds were going into. It's quite clear. Can you explain to my audience a little bit about this? Again, there's a lot still to unpack, and so much can still happen even now, because we haven't even gotten to the full thing, even if this does get to a case.
Yeah, exactly. There hasn't been forensic evidence. There hasn't been an autopsy, so we'll know even more then. But from the video that I saw, I absolutely agree with the person who made the comment. It looks, he fired the shots from the side, which is what I said in my tweet. He was not firing them from the front of the car. So he was already out of, he did have to jump out of the way, or he jumped out of the way, but he was already out of the way when he fired the shots. So that just eviscerates any self-defense claim, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So again, speaking about this with Keaton, and I think we were speaking about for at least an hour and a half what took place in Minnesota. There's also been on the ground video and people speaking about what they saw, how they saw it, and overall their perspective of what happened to this poor woman. And so I think in many ways, as we are covering this and seeing protests happening, we're seeing ICE engage in arresting people. We're seeing this overall intensification. It does go back to right now where we're going to with free speech, and that is talking about this and what could potentially happen to anyone that's going to be trying to cover the story in an objective perspective. And again, I have my biases. I think what happened in Minneapolis was wrong. We have to go with also what's going to be happening with how social media is talking about this, and everyone is saying like now there's more video evidence coming out recently. There's a video from CNN. I don't know if you have time to stay on, but I can actually pull this video up where you have Anderson Cooper talking about how she arrived 4 minutes before ICE and no one was stuck and cars were moving freely. I just want to get your thoughts on this for free speech. What does this mean for us, especially when it comes down talking to this story, because it's clearly violence and violent interactions between ICE and protesters, police. It's going to happen, and we're kidding ourselves if we just say that it's not.
Do you mean like with the you think that the government will try to silence free speech on this murder?
Yeah, I think so. Because with what happened to the Hunter Biden laptop story, or talking about COVID, or how Russiagate is somehow Russia, the evil Putin, James Bond villain that's controlling the world. Let's face it, we've seen this before. I'm only scratching the surface, but what happened with censorship? We can't kid ourselves. This happened. We lived through it, and I've dealt with the censorship firsthand for some of the most dumbest things ever.
Yeah. I think that, you might very well be right. I don't know what's going on behind closed doors. Obviously, this administration has shown itself to be pretty lawless and have no morals. So I absolutely wouldn't be surprised if it turns out that they're telling social media companies to downgrade certain views on this issue, or to you know, I don't know. I mean, I have no evidence right now, so I don't want to necessarily speculate, but absolutely wouldn't be surprised if they do something like that.
Right. And if you have time, I actually have this video that one of my viewers just shared with me about new evidence coming out here. So I think it's only fair. Again, folks, anything can happen. Things can change at a moment's notice, especially with a story that's going to be this emotional. It's about 5 minutes. It's for our friends from CNN. I want to thank my guests for at least staying here for this part of it. So let's play it. It's Anderson Cooper.
Now to Minneapolis. And as we said, new video tonight. This is some of it. It is grainy, difficult to see. Could provide it certainly provides another angle on what happened before 37-year-old Minneapolis mom was shot and killed by an ICE officer shortly after dropping her 6-year-old off at school. Now, it comes on what has been a tense day there, with more federal agents surging into the city. Minnesota's governor putting the state National Guard on standby to support local law enforcement if necessary. This is the live images of a protest, a demonstration, gathering in the streets there. This is what it looks like right now, downtown Minneapolis. Demonstrators have also gathered at this shooting scene, which itself is just blocks away from where police killed George Floyd 5.5 years ago. Now, earlier today, armed agents at a federal building near the airport pushed back protesters, deploying some kind of crowd repellent gas and making at least one arrest after someone, according to CNN's Omar Jimenez, apparently threw a water bottle. Throughout the day, the Trump administration has first doubled and then tripled down on its claim that the shooting was the result of an act of domestic terrorism, and that the killing of Renee Good was, in the words of Vice President Vance today, a, quote, tragedy of her own making. He said that with certainty, and said this as if it was an established fact.
The Department of Homeland Security is already investigating this, but the simple fact is what you see is what you get in this case. You have a woman who was trying to obstruct a legitimate law enforcement operation. Nobody debates that. You have a woman who aimed her car at a law enforcement officer and pressed on the accelerator. Nobody debates that.
Well, keeping them honest, people are debating that. Just to remind you, here it is, slowed down. This is from one of the camera angles that we have. You see one officer walk over to the car. He told her to get the F out of the vehicle, put his hand into the window. The car, she backs up. The car's reverse lights go on. The officer pulls on the door handle with his right hand, eventually reaching inside the open window with his left. The other officer is now in front of her car, and her reverse lights go out. When the car begins to move forward, the officer unholsters his weapon. He fires it once. It appears towards her windshield, second time what appears to be her open window, and then a third shot immediately afterwards. And the car goes careening down the street. The officer reholsters his weapon. Now, take a look at it again, this shooting in real time from two different angles, which we've synced side by side.
I'm going to just stop here with that. Again, this is rather devastating that we are seeing this firsthand. So with this evidence, and of course the vice president even responding, and he's blaming leftist media and training and everything else, clearly more of this is coming out. And if she was arriving there 4 minutes beforehand, vehicle not stuck. And again, you know, if I've lived in Chicago winters, I've dealt with some of the worst snowstorms ever. No vehicle was stuck. No vehicle was trapped.
Yeah, I think that was the video I was referring to that I had seen that suggests she was actually dropping her kid off at school. And then I mean, to me, the evidence at this point doesn't even show that she was part of any protest or anything, although I might be wrong about that, but and it's not the most important question in the world, because the real question is whether he was justified in shooting her. But it looked to me like she just dropped her kid off at school. You know, that's the kind of thing I would do, like be like, oh wait, I have to answer some emails or text messages. Let me, you know, hopefully park a little bit better. But so I think the government's whole claim is falling apart at this point.
Yeah, and again, when you have the vice president even now weighing in on this, because we have seen, everyone has seen, horrific incidents where law enforcement both local or federal, have overstepped their boundaries. And I will just say this, at least previous Democrat and Republican administrations have not gone on to make this a personal involvement like this administration has. And let's be clear here. We got Donald Trump. His whole business has been media and television. I mean, it's his MO, which is why he's been able to be around for as long as he have. But you had a vice president now saying that this person did this upon themselves. Not necessarily. And looking at this video here, you have somebody who's scared. She is scared. She is frightened. And, you know, unless this recording, whatever was, if his cell phone was working, if he was recording it, she looks him dead in the eye, just like what Keenan and I were saying on yesterday's show for Due Dissidents. Unless she's looking you straight in the eye and she just puts the pedal to the metal, but I'm willing to bet she's scared. She's wanting to get out of here. Who knows, you know, what else she's thinking at the time. I mean, she's probably thinking about her kids, 3 men, 1 woman by herself. They're telling her to get the F out, weapons drawn. You have to be an absolute inhumane person to think that she's not afraid.
Yeah.
She has to be afraid.
Exactly.
Any psychologist will tell this to you. And anyone who understands human behavior, and humans, we're animals too. And when we get scared, sometimes we got to up and run. Consequences be damned with the adrenaline pumping through us. But overall, it is setting up a situation in which we are looking at a legal process. But as it stands right now, there's a lot that could prevent this from happening. But but even if it does, is there any kind of glimmer of hope for people to see some kind of justice, or are we just waiting in the wings now?
I think we're waiting in the wings. I both. I think there's a glimmer of hope. I think, you know, I think the public outcry might put enough pressure on the administration to do something. As I said before, because of the lack of trust, I think at this point, a federal investigation is not going to be satisfactory to people. So I think this should be turned over to the Minneapolis Police Department to investigate and potentially prosecute. Again, he's going to raise defenses. He should not win on those defenses, such as that he was acting within the scope of his official duties, so he shouldn't be able to be prosecuted by the state. But unfortunately, courts tend to be pretty deferential to the feds when those defenses are raised. So, but maybe in this case it won't happen. So yes, there's definitely hope, and I do think public pressure is actually going to be important here. If it's this might become a crisis for the administration to the point where they decide they have to comply to some extent. I mean, we don't even know the officer's identity, right? I'm actually
allegedly there are some names being dropped. Again, I'm not pulling. I want to be hesitant.
Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah,
because they're saying they have his name, but knowing how there's AI and deep fakes and everything of that nature. And again, this could be authentic, but until I'm seeing more people say like, this is who it is, this is who the person is. And again, what I want to say here online is, I know people are very emotional about this. I know people are emotionally charged about this on the left and the right. But until then, let's let the process play out. And again, people are going to be disappointed with the process. But there is at least photos allegedly of the man's name and what he looks like. But until then, I would say, don't jump to conclusions right away.
Yeah, no, we should, because we also, you know, don't want the wrong person to get.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Yes, and of course, Freddie G, I understand. I've seen the same video and photos too of him walking away. Now, again, I did play that early on in a stream that I did before the day before I was Due Dissidents with Keaton, and of course, we did show that there too. The guy is not in the hospital. He's not suffering from major injuries. His legs are still working fine. He's able to move about. Unless I see counter evidence of him in the hospital, he's okay. He's okay.
Yeah. And
I don't know how he's doing up here though, because he took a life.
Well, yeah, I mean, his conduct too, as I mentioned earlier, is just not consistent with somebody who believes that they were justified. You know, the people I've seen who've done that have generally, especially officers, have immediately turned their guns in, turned themselves in, subjected themselves to an investigation, and said they would cooperate because they knew that they were in the right. This is not the behavior of somebody who thinks they were in the right.
And again, now I notice people from The Intercept and Fortune right now that have the person's name. And I just want to state here right now, as it stands, he has not turned himself in, at least for the current point in time, but with enough public pressure that could be the case. But the city is now begging, at least as it stands right now, from some of the sources that are being sent to me by some of my viewers, and that is the city is begging for an investigation. So until then, I think it's more of a hurry up and wait kind of process. But as a final note, everything that's been going on, I know that people have been reaching out to you to speak about this issue, especially about the dangers of free speech and what could happen to us as a whole for independent media. Is there any kind of final note that I want to give to you to share with our audience, and what more we can do to really be the guardians for free speech so that all can speak, but at the same time too, with this crisis in Minnesota, what's on the horizon?
Well, I think to tie it all together, we are living in some really scary times, some really divisive times, and I wish that people would recognize that we're generally speaking not each other's enemies. The person who votes Democrat or Republican next door is not really your enemy. What our enemy is powerful people getting a lot more power and exploiting that and wasting our tax money on foreign interventions that are completely unnecessary and killing people. And I'm seeing things about how much our taxes are likely to go up because of this these wars of aggression that the administration is conducting. That's another whole subject. But, having tolerance for each other's differences of opinion on issues is important in terms of realizing that we're really, we're not each other's enemies. We're not the problem.
I think that's a great note. Real quick, because you mentioned Venezuela. Look, I'm very impressed that this administration managed to kidnap a president alive. Very interesting to see the discovery process on that. But I mean, since you already got JD Vance angry with you, let's go ahead, go all in with Venezuela. But what are your thoughts on the legal process of good old Maduro is going to have to go through? And I would say let's do a dance-off between Maduro and Trump. Maybe that's the only way Maduro can get out of it, whoever can dance better. But your thought on this and the process that Maduro is going to have to do, because he's in our legal system.
Yeah.
He has a right to defend himself. Julian Assange's lawyer is defending him. And innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. At least that's what the TV has told me.
Well, yeah, with the caveat that Venezuela is not my area of expertise at all. I've never heard of a sitting head of state being kidnapped by the United States and tried on domestic gun charges, like under U.S. laws. But I mean, the guns were presumably in Venezuela, but like that's completely nuts. We don't get to go around the world prosecuting other people for violating our laws. That's crazy. Our laws only apply within our country. We're not like the world police force. So this is, from what I understand, absolutely completely nuts. I don't know exactly what his lawyer is going to raise. I would think that would be number one. Like, firearms laws don't apply outside of U.S. borders.
I mean, hey, if you're a Second Amendment fan, you should be a fan of Maduro having a machine gun. I mean, like that's what I would agree upon. But also, look, if this continues to go forward, again, under Obama, Osama bin Laden gone, under Bush, or I think it was under Bush. Saddam Hussein, obviously he was dealt with Iraqi court system, hanged. It always happens with these dictators or tyrants. Like they're always gone. They really can't tell their side of the story. We got Maduro here to tell his side of the story, and you made it clear this is not in your area of expertise. But I'm pretty sure, and I've said this too. I'm interested about the discovery process for Maduro. Yeah. Clearly he's going to be speaking things out, and I'm a fan of the movie New Jack City, where Wesley Snipes' character say, "Hey, this is bigger than me." Maduro's probably got a lot to say. And if you're part of the neoliberal establishment, you're like, you don't want Maduro to speak. You don't want him to speak at all. But go ahead. The discovery process has got to be interesting for that, because he's got a lot to say. And they're saying that they changed the changes about him being fentanyl or being part of a cocaine association or cartel. But clearly, I just want to get your thoughts on that.
It's completely crazy. I've never heard of anything like this. We don't try sitting heads of state in U.S. courts for this is very, very bizarre. And it sets a problematic precedent. So yes, I would think that there will be interesting discovery if it even gets to that. I don't know if the case will be dismissed because it's just going to be very hard, I would think, to convince a judge that you can prosecute the president of Venezuela under U.S. firearms law. Very odd. If he was in the U.S., that would be a different matter. He had been in the U.S. but for things he did in Venezuela, that's just strange.
Again, yeah, Venezuelan laws, American laws. Controversial. I'm not a lawyer, but controversial statement here. That's brave and beautiful. Two different things altogether.
Yes.
I think I'll get a passing grade on that. So that's as much as I want to say on that. But on top of that, here too, folks, we are living in some interesting times, and I would love to have you back on as a guest. I know you're going to be on the Jimmy Dore Show, but is there anything else you want to help promote? I know you host a podcast. I want to make sure that that is correct as well. I think I think it's called Previously Prohibited. So
That's
you're on
right.
YouTube. So at least when does your show go live? Where can people follow you on social media? And I know you're going to be on the Jimmy Dore Show, but is there any other interviews that are going to be happening for you later on that you want to help promote, so that way my viewers can go there to stand in solidarity and people can check it out?
I do have some upcoming, but I don't have the dates and times set, so I'll get back to you on that. But yeah, so Previously Prohibited, my podcast co-host is Melissa Whitty, who goes by Village Crazy Lady. That is her Twitter handle. And I'm at Jenin Younes Esquire. Just my name all in one, or ESQ actually, ESQ.
Okay.
On Twitter. And so we tend to go live like Sunday and Wednesday, but we're not very good at sticking to the schedule because it kind of depends on work and stuff like that. So
Okay.
yeah, we
Well-
sometimes have guests, although we've had fewer recently because I've been busy and haven't been able to schedule them. But
That's perfectly fine. But I think with the vice president coming after you directly, I think you're going to get a big boost in views. So I would say to everyone, check out Previously Prohibited. Please follow Jenin on social media. Clearly, I would love to have you back on as a guest. Because the way things are playing out, especially with the story of Minneapolis, the way things are happening with free speech, YouTube deleting last year 12 million plus channels, which is very scary to me. And you know, I don't like censorship and anyone that uses it or tries to use it as a weapon. But it's very clear that, you know, you've been a strong advocate, and I would love to have you back on again. This is your YouTube channel. So for everyone, please check her out. You're going to see her again later today on the Jimmy Dore Show, hosted by Keaton, co-host of Due Dissidence. And I'd say to everyone, please like, comment, share, subscribe. And you have been a phenomenal guest. We got one more segment to talk about, and then we'll be wrapping it up. But again, any other final notes you would like to end on before we send you back out so that JD can be angry with you?
Thank you so much. No, I think we covered a lot of ground, but that was fun. Thank you for having me, and I'm happy to come back whenever.
And you don't stop, just push through and you don't stop. Broken and bruised, you don't stop. Coughing up fluid, you don't stop. Alright, fresh from the mines that brought you King Midas. Sign of the times, call me Homo detritus. Karma's a beast and its fleas make a plague look childish. Are we home of the brave or the best or the brightest? None of the above, and my answer's as final as one wrong look at one of Brooklyn's finest. Now Barack was a real class act, better walk to The Hague so stylish, where he can perch on a warlord's throne, made a little-known Middle East drone violence. Buddy, they were logging mileage while you and your smartphone were both on silent. Too busy hailing Barack as a well-spoken token that prejudice was dead and America had woken up when all along our bigotry was thriving. In a rising red vitriolic tide so thick that it is binding, like a contract of slavery they gave us in writing. Loophole amendments that lay on their minds and then go into hiding, so they can legislate slaves to a 20-cent wage if they're on the inside. The road isn't long, it is wide, and there's not much winding. They just lead you to a lifetime of small crime, bring you back and put you in a line, doing sweatshop labor for a couple fucking dimes. And you can spend your whole life here being beaten by a staff of steroid gym rat white nationals. Do it all for Nike, buddy, do it for the Capitol, do it for the guards so they'll treat you like an animal. Do it when you're sick or you're sore, cause you have to. Do it so the prison shareholders can roll in their dough and remodel their bathrooms with walk-in showers that might be a little bit bigger than the cell where you spend 20 hours of your 24, maybe more. They don't count it anymore. They just need you well enough to move a product out the door. They just got a marble countertop and all new tile floors. Heated fucking seats on a bidet that you help them afford. But they won't lift a finger if your warden goes overboard, makes your common area an unspoken COVID ward. Lets you intermingle like he hadn't really done before. Now there's a lot of pits dug up in the yard, all numbered, and he still won't tell you what the number's for. But it's gotta be a warning, and probably the kind that you might need thunder for. When the realization strikes they've been grouping you tight and restricting your time outside, it won't take a genius to link it to all of the coughing that's keeping you up every night. So if you can't abide slaves, I'll state the case plain. A prisoner shares the same rights, and your tax dollars are lining the pockets of those who ensure that the luxuries of medicine and showers are consistently denied. And you can spend 8 years if you're black because you burned up a trash can, but you won't see any time if you rape when you're young and you're white. And in 5 years' time, that white rapist guy gets a job as a guard where he finds a new prey to dehumanize. And it's ingrained as a part of our system of justice so deeply that it's not scrutinized. And if we're talking capital punishment, all of these assholes with bludgeons who call themselves justice could probably be euthanized. Rather than giving them 70 humans to supervise, torture, and brutalize. Sensitivity training can't teach you the value of human life. It's a message that's basic. Our nature has shaped it, and culture is born out of breaking it down and then seeing it crucified. I feel like I'm watching every day with exponentially more lucid eyes, till I'm drooling out my cheek and down my side, and my eyes are the dullest shade of overdose white. When just a dose of reality hits like an overdose might. It's a gross mentality that keeps this country going. Makes you wonder why we're keeping it alive, and we don't stop. Just push through and you don't stop. Coughing up fluid, you don't stop. Guards gang rape you and you don't stop. They take your commissary, you don't stop. Your mother's being buried, you don't stop. When nothing is forgiven, you don't stop. When life's not living, you don't stop. You just push through and you don't stop. Coughing up fluid, you don't stop. Guards gang rape you and you don't stop. Broken and bruised, you don't stop. They take your commissary, you don't stop. Your mother's being buried, you don't stop. When nothing is forgiven, you don't stop. When life's not living, you don't stop. You just push through, you don't stop. Coughing up fluid, you don't stop.